think we all recognise that we're now approaching Brexit endgame. And irrespective of whether or not there is a trade deal agreed between the United Kingdom and the European Union, and I hope there is, but irrespective of that, I think we all need to recognise that Brexit is a momentous occasion, not just for the United Kingdom, but also for this country. In years to come, when the history of the 21st century is written of Ireland and indeed of the UK, Brexit will feature very strongly and prominently. The reason why it's having such a momentous impact on this country, and will have such a momentous impact in this country, is because our history and our lives are to a very significant extent affected by the lives and politics of the United Kingdom. That has been the case for 1,000 years. The history of this island has been affected significantly by the history of the neighbouring larger island, and that is probably going to continue into the next number of centuries. I think it is worthwhile at the outset that we really reflect on what are the political origins of Brexit, and why was it that our closest neighbour, a country with which we have so much in common, made what we all in this House believe is the regressive decision to decide to leave the European Union and to decide to furrow their own path in what they believe is in the better interests of the United Kingdom. Also, while we're doing that, I think we should recognise that at the same time Brexit happened, an extraordinary political event happened in the United States. I think sometimes we forget the significance that back in 2016, and he's still in power today, that the people of the United States elected as their president a well-known businessman who was a TV celebrity and who achieved prominence in the United States in his campaign because he condemned the political system that operated in the United States at the time. And the reason I think it's worthwhile that we in this House look at those political events and the origins of both of them is that we have to recognise that as a country we are hugely affected by what happens in the United Kingdom and in the United States of America. They're two very powerful political entities in the world. They've had very significant influences throughout all the world, and we need to recognise that we're sandwiched between the two of them, and it's only natural and it's not unusual that our politics has been affected and will continue to be affected by events that happen in the United States and happen in the United Kingdom. If you look at the origins of Brexit, you can really see that the origins of Brexit were a form of English nationalism. And it was a form of English nationalism that really wished to reject association with and alignment with Europe. Leave aside the whole issue of the European Union. At the heart of Brexit was a concern that the United Kingdom had become too close to its European neighbours, and linked with that was the whole issue of immigration. And it was on that basis that the majority of voters in the United Kingdom, namely in England, made a decision that they wanted to leave the European Union. And it's instructive to note, of course, that the people of Scotland, the people of Northern Ireland, decided that they did not want to leave the European Union, but they unfortunately are stuck with it now because of the dominance of English nationalism in that debate. And then if you go and you look at what happened in the United States with the election of President Trump, again there was a form of nationalism associated with his election. There was also a rejection of what was regarded as the middle ground of politics. And at the heart of both Brexit and the election of President Trump was really a rejection of the centre ground. What it was an argument that said polarised politics is good. And it has had that effect in the United Kingdom. And unfortunately, as we've seen from the United States recently, there also is a very polarised political world there at present. So the reason I've mentioned these 2 points are because since other aspects of our lives are influenced by the United States and the United Kingdom, I think we have to be particularly careful that we don't allow our politics to become infected in the same way as the politics of the United Kingdom through Brexit and the United States through the election of President Trump have become polarised. And I regret to say that it may be the case that we are going down that pathway of polarised politics in this country. If you look at the way politics operates in the United States and the United Kingdom, you can see that it is very strategic, it is very deliberate, and it is more advanced than politics in this country. Now, that may sound like it's intended to be a compliment. It's not. Simply because politics is advanced and because it's strategic doesn't mean that it leads to good governance. But what I mean when I say that politics in those countries is strategic and advanced is that the political groupings in those countries know what they need to do in order to attract political support behind their own political groups. That's what I mean when I say it's strategic and advanced. And unfortunately, in those countries, the political objectives of those political groups are universally put ahead of what is regarded as being good governance in those countries. Now, I think we need to be careful in respect that we do not allow this country to go down the route of polarised politics. Unfortunately, for decades, probably generations, we've seen in Northern Ireland that there is polarised politics there. But what do we mean when we say that politics has become polarised? What it really is the negation of politics. It means that people don't look at issues on the basis of the content of the issue. Instead, they decide their view on an issue by trying to see, well, which side is my political grouping in favour of? And that has happened, unfortunately. We've seen it for many years in Northern Ireland. We even see it today in respect of the response to the pandemic. No issue in Northern Ireland appears to be safe or liberated from the politics of green and orange. And this is what is happening in the United Kingdom when it comes to Brexit, and this is what has happened in the United States when it comes to the politics that they operate there. That is why I believe it is so important that in this country we try to hold the centre ground. And that is why I believe that Fianna Fáil is so important to this country, to ensure that there is a large national party in the centre ground representing the centre-left of this country for the purpose of ensuring that we don't have a polarised political system. Unfortunately, social media contributes to the polarisation of politics. It is, in fact, the weapon that is used to polarise political politics. And if you're going to polarise politics, one of the things you must have is you must have an enemy. And the enemy can never do anything right. And the enemy must always be condemned for not representing the interests who your political group represents. And that is a consequence of polarised politics. I think it is extremely important in this country that we don't allow political engagement on social media or elsewhere to be debased to a situation where it's just becoming attack politics. I regret to say that some of the parties in this House engage in that form of attack politics. The members of this House don't. Most members of this House are reasonable people. They know that there is a resolution to political disputes. They recognise that there should be debate about political disputes. And in general, my assessment of members of Dáil Éireann is that they are open-minded people. But behind us, there are people whose sole objective is to advance the political success of their own political agendas and political groupings. And for that purpose, they are using social media to create polarisation. I think we need to be careful of it. If it is the case that this country becomes extremely polarised politically, let's be clear as to what will happen. We'll go down the same pathway as the United States or indeed the United Kingdom. We will have people divided on the basis of whether they belong to one political grouping or another. Political engagement then ceases. Political debate then becomes irrelevant. The only issue is, well, where does my tribe stand in respect of this? So I think that is a message that we have learned from Brexit, and it's a message that we all have to be careful of. If we go down the route of achieving polarised politics in this country, it is very difficult to reverse it, as we've seen what's happened in the United Kingdom, as we see what's happened in the United States of America. Once people go down that route, it will take a generation to reverse it. So what's the solution then to ensure that we don't get polarised politics? I'm not requiring that every member of this House decide that they're going to position themselves in the centre ground, because that is a polarisation in itself. Everyone is stuck in the centre. But I do think we need to all ensure that we don't condemn our political opponents on the basis that they do not represent, or nor do they seek to speak for anyone else other than their own grouping elite, as it's sometimes represented. I think we need to recognise that engagement is the success in politics. The great political success of this generation on these islands was the Good Friday Agreement. If you look at even in Britain, the great diplomatic success in Britain of the past 20, 30 years has been the Good Friday Agreement. It was achieved through negotiation. It was achieved through respect. It was achieved through discussion and debate. And that is the secret to the centre ground. And that is why we must be so careful not to allow this country to go down the same route as the United States and the United Kingdom. Thank you.